Two cities, one bridge between them. On one side, El Paso, Texas. For 4 years running, ranked one of the safest large cities in the entire United States. Fewer than 30 murders across 2 full years. On the other side, close enough to see from El Paso's rooftops, Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. In that same stretch, one of the deadliest cities on the entire planet. Over 3,000 murders in a single year. Same river valley, same climate, same people in many cases, the same extended families split by a border crossing. What separated the safest city in America from one of the most dangerous cities on earth wasn't distance. It was which cartel controlled which side of a smuggling corridor and how far the people meant to stop them were willing to go instead. This is the story of the war for Ciudad Juarez. The Juárez Cartel against the Sinaloa Cartel, and the 10,000 people who died so one of them could own the bridge. If you watched this channel's episode on Amado Carrillo Fuentes, you already know how this story starts. In 1997, the Lord of the Skies died on an operating table during plastic surgery meant to help him disappear. His brother Vicente Carrillo Fuentes took over the Juárez Cartel alongside longtime ally Juan José Esparragoza, El Azul, who would later help build the Sinaloa Federation instead. Vicente inherited an empire built on one man's relationships and one man's fleet of planes. He didn't have his brother's reach, and everyone in Mexico's underworld could see it. The Juárez Cartel was still Mexico's most valuable border corridor. It just no longer had Mexico's most capable boss running it. To hold the plaza without Amado's leverage, the Juárez Cartel leaned harder on an enforcement arm called La Línea, the line. La Línea wasn't built from street gangs. It was built, in significant part, from serving and former Chihuahua state and municipal police officers, men who kept their badges, their access, and their institutional knowledge while working directly for the cartel. It's a pattern this channel keeps finding at the center of Mexico's cartel wars. The people meant to enforce the law, becoming the people enforcing the cartel's law instead. La Línea didn't stop at Mexican police. In 2008, it formed an alliance with Barrio Azteca, a street and prison gang founded inside the El Paso, Texas prison system back in 1986, and grown large through waves of deportations of Mexican nationals from US prisons in the years that followed. Barrio Azteca brought something La Línea didn't have on its own. An operational network already sitting on the American side of the border, ready to move people, weapons, and vehicles across it. By the mid-2000s, the Sinaloa Cartel, growing fast under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, wanted Ciudad Juarez for itself. To take it, Sinaloa built its own enforcement wing specifically for the job. Gente Nueva, new people. Like La Línea on the other side, Gente Nueva recruited heavily from former federal police and military personnel, professional, trained killers who understood exactly how Mexican law enforcement worked because many of them had been Mexican law enforcement. 2 cartels, 2 enforcement wings, both built substantially out of the same institutions that were supposed to be fighting them. On January 5th, 2008, the war for Ciudad Juarez formally broke out. In Juarez, people simply called it La Guerra, the war. The numbers tell the story faster than any single incident could. In 2007, the year before the war started, Ciudad Juarez recorded around 300 murders, already a high number for a city its size. In 2008, that number jumped to 1,587. In 2009, 2,643. In 2010, over 3,100, with some counts pushing past 3,700 at the conflict's worst point. Across just 3 years, more than 7,000 people were killed in a single city of roughly 1.5 million people. This wasn't simply two cartels fighting in a city that happened to have police in it. Investigators who studied the conflict found something stranger. Parts of the Mexican state were effectively fighting each other through the two sides. Sinaloa's Gente Nueva had deep ties to federal police and the Mexican military. Línea and the Juárez Cartel behind it had its strongest relationships with state and municipal police. Officers who took bribes or looked the other way survived. Officers who didn't were killed. And political power in Juárez followed the same logic. Whichever side controlled local law enforcement had a direct hand in who got elected to keep controlling it. The war wasn't just cartel versus cartel. It was one arm of Mexico's own security apparatus against another, both wearing different cartels' colors. In March 2008, with the murder count already climbing, Mexico's federal government sent in the army. Operativo Conjunto Chihuahua eventually put as many as 10,000 soldiers and federal police on the streets of Ciudad Juarez, a military occupation of a single city, meant to restore order that local and state police had already lost or sold. It didn't work. Violence, kidnappings, and extortion all continued rising after the troops arrived, not falling. What the operation did produce was a second body of evidence entirely. By 2011, more than 1,000 formal complaints had been filed against soldiers and federal officers in Juarez alone, alleging arbitrary detention, torture, and forced disappearance. In 2018, Mexico's own government was found responsible by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights for one such case: the disappearance of 3 people during the operation. The institution sent in to end the corruption ended up on the same list of abuses as the cartels it was deployed against. On January 31st, 2010, the war produced one of its most devastating single nights. In the Villas de Salvárcar neighborhood, roughly 20 gunmen tied to La Línea stormed a house party for a group of high school and university students celebrating a friend's 18th birthday. They blocked the exits and opened fire on the crowd. 16 people were killed, most of them teenagers. It later emerged that the gunmen had the wrong house. The intended targets, according to investigators, were rival gang members rumored to be at a nearby address. Instead, an entire generation of one Juárez neighborhood lost friends and children to a case of mistaken identity in a war that, by that point, didn't need a reason to kill at all. 6 weeks later, the war reached directly into a US government building. On March 13, 2010, gunmen from Barrio Azteca, a US-based street gang operating as an enforcement arm for La Línea, killed a pregnant employee of the American consulate in Juárez, Leslie Enriquez, along with her husband, as they left a child's birthday party. In a coordinated attack the same day, the same organization killed the husband of another consulate employee. Investigators later determined the gunmen had, once again, targeted the wrong people, mistaking the victims for rivals. It was the second time in 6 weeks that a case of mistaken identity in this war had killed people with no connection to it at all. The killings reached a U.S. federal courtroom. The Barrio Azteca lieutenant who ordered the attack and the gunman who carried it out were eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. One of the only moments in this entire war where the American justice system, rather than the Mexican one, delivered the final verdict. Through all of this, El Paso, Texas sat directly across the border, visible from Juárez rooftops, and stayed one of the safest cities of its size in the entire United States. Experts who studied the disparity found a simple explanation. The cartels kept their violence and their business almost entirely on the Mexican side of the line. There was no war to fight in El Paso. there was only a war to fight for the right to move product through it. Two cities sharing a river, a climate, and in many families, blood relatives, on opposite sides of the most dangerous border-crossing disparity in North America. By 2012, US intelligence assessments concluded what the numbers had already started to suggest. Sinaloa and Gente Nueva had won. The Juárez Cartel and La Línea were pushed to the margins of a plaza they'd controlled for over a decade. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes held on for 2 more years before Mexican authorities finally arrested him in 2014. He was convicted and remained in custody until his death in prison in 2024. The same year, coincidentally, that Ciudad Juarez's murder rate had fallen far enough that National Geographic ran a feature on the city's recovery. The empire his brother built on airplanes and institutional protection didn't just lose the war. It lost the city the war was fought over. 10,000 people died in 4 years, so one cartel could take a border crossing from another. Not for the drugs themselves, those would have crossed regardless of who ran the plaza, but for the right to tax, control, and protect the route they crossed on. And the war wasn't decided by which cartel had better gunmen. It was decided by which cartel had better relationships with the parts of the Mexican state still willing to pick a side. 2 cities, 1 bridge. On one side, one of the safest places in America. On the other, for 4 years, one of the deadliest places on earth. The distance between them was never the river. It was who was getting paid to look away, and from which direction. If you want the rest of the story behind these wars, the cartels, and the institutions that keep letting them win, subscribe for more videos like this one every